credits, we're diving into the Star Wars prequel trilogy, the rise, fall, and transformation of Anakin Skywalker. And imagine stepping onto this freezing, just hyper air-conditioned soundstage back in 1997.
Oh, yeah. Setting the scene.
Right. You put on this skin-tight suit, and it's covered in these bizarre ping-pong balls. You are told to just act your heart out opposite cinematic heavyweights, like Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor.
No pressure at all.
None at all. And you know full well that your physical performance is about to either completely revolutionize the very fabric of cinema forever, or it's going to make you the most relentlessly mocked character on the early internet.
Which is a terrifying coin toss, really.
It is. But that was the reality for the pioneers building the foundation of modern digital filmmaking.
It genuinely is fascinating how time completely shifts our cultural understanding of a piece of art. I mean, for decades, the public discourse surrounding the Star Wars prequels felt like, well, it was like judging a massive record-breaking skyscraper purely by the reflection on its exterior glass.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, people just stared at the shiny, sometimes polarizing surface layer, right? And they completely ignored the absolute engineering marvel happening underneath.
Which is exactly why we are bypassing that surface today. We aren't here to just read you a Wikipedia plot summary. We're going to dig into that subterranean foundation. The poured concrete, the rebar.
The good stuff.
Exactly. We're breaking down the deeply misunderstood digital revolution these films sparked, the psychological mechanics behind John Williams' score, and the terrifyingly accurate historical blueprints George Lucas used to map out the collapse of a democracy.
And to do that properly, we really have to start by looking at the structural skeleton of the entire saga.
Right. Back to 1999.
Yeah, we begin in 1999 with Episode I, The Phantom Menace. And on a pure narrative level, the baseline is this seemingly dry political crisis.
The taxation of trade routes.
Right. The corporate juggernaut known as the Trade Federation blockades the peaceful planet of Naboo. The Republic dispatches 2 Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi, to intervene.
But the intervention goes immediately south.
Immediately.
They smuggle Naboo's leader, Queen Amidala, off the planet, and they sustain ship damage that forces this fateful detour to the remote desert world of Tatooine.
Which changes the entire galaxy.
Totally. Because that is where they stumble upon a 9-year-old enslaved boy named Anakin Skywalker. Qui-Gon becomes convinced this kid is like a mythological chosen one.
Yeah, born of the Force itself.
Right, so they win his freedom, take him to the galactic capital of Coruscant, and eventually return to Naboo to break the blockade, which all culminates in that iconic 3-way duel of the fates against Darth Maul.
Now, on its face, that sounds like a very straightforward, linear hero's journey.
Yeah, classic Star Wars.
But the sources we're pulling from today highlight this extensive analysis by writer Mike Klimo. And he argues that Lucas wasn't writing a linear story at all.
Wait, really?
No. He was utilizing an ancient, highly complex compositional technique called ring composition, or chiasmus.
Okay, I remember studying chiasmus in literature classes. It's like a poetic structure, right? Where words or concepts are repeated in reverse order.
Exactly.
Like, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Perfect example.
But applying a poetic rhyme scheme to a multi-billion-dollar 6-part space opera, that feels incredibly ambitious. How does that actually work mechanically across decades of filmmaking?
Well, it requires meticulous planning. I mean, in ring composition, a narrative sequence progresses to a specific midpoint, the ring turns, and then the first sequence is mirrored in reverse.
All right, Hal.
So if the 6 films are a stanza of poetry, the overarching rhyme scheme is A, B, C, and then C prime, B prime, A prime.
Let me map that out for everyone. So Phantom Menace is film A.
Yep.
Attack of the Clones is B. Revenge of the Sith is C. Then the original trilogy mirrors it backwards.
You got it.
So Revenge of the Sith mirrors A New Hope, Attack of the Clones mirrors The Empire Strikes Back, and The Phantom Menace acts as the bookend, directly mirroring Return of the Jedi.
That is the exact architecture. And Klimo provides a phenomenal visual smoking gun for this theory, which is the opening shots of the films.
Oh, I love this.
Let's trace the visual mirror. Think about the iconic opening of A New Hope. The camera pans down to a planet, a tiny rebel ship flies overhead, moving away from the audience, and then a massive Imperial Star Destroyer pursues it.
Completely swallowing the frame.
Yes. It instantly establishes the dynamic of a small band of rebels fleeing a massive evil empire.
Right. Contrast that with the opening of the Phantom Menace. The camera pans down, a sleek Republic cruiser flies past the camera, but instead of being chased, it just docks peacefully inside a Trade Federation battleship.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I remember feeling a bit let down by that. It felt anticlimactic.
It feels anticlimactic until you realize you aren't supposed to compare it to A New Hope.
Oh, right, because of the ring structure.
Exactly. You'd have to compare it to its ring counterpart, which is Return of the Jedi.
Oh.
Consider the opening of Jedi. The camera pans down to a spherical battle station, the Death Star orbiting a forest planet. An Imperial shuttle flies toward it and lands in a docking bay.
Oh, wow. That is staggering. Let me look at the Phantom Menace again in my head. A spherical battle station, the Trade Federation ship orbiting a forest planet, Naboo.
Okay.
A small ship flies toward it and lands in a docking bay. They are identical setups.
Identical, but fundamentally reversed. This is where the chiasmus kicks in. In the Phantom Menace, the small ship contains the heroes, right? The Republic cruiser.
Yeah.
In Return of the Jedi, the small ship contains the villains, the Imperial shuttle.
Oh, that's so cool.
And outside the window in Menace, we see the lush, living world of Naboo.
Yeah.
Outside the window in Jedi, we see the skeletal, terrifying Death Star. Even the literal screen direction is flipped.
Oh, way.
Yeah. In Menace, the ship moves left to right. In Jedi, the shuttle moves right to left.
Why go through all that trouble, though? I mean, is it just a clever Easter egg for film students, or does this structural mirroring serve a psychological purpose for the viewer?
It serves a deeply mythological purpose. By repeating these specific visual and narrative patterns, Lucas is tapping into the cyclical nature of human history.
Making it feel like a true epic.
Right. The viewer is subconsciously forced to compare the journey of the father, Anakin, to the journey of the son, Luke. The environmental pressures remain constant across generations, but the individual choices the characters make within those repeating patterns are what define their ultimate fates.
Wow.
It elevates the story from a simple sci-fi adventure into a generational myth.
That honestly reframes the entire viewing experience. And speaking of the environmental pressures these characters face, we have to talk about the political landscape of the Phantom Menace.
Politics. Yeah.
When I was younger, the trade disputes and the Galactic Senate hearings, they felt like listening to a C-SPAN broadcast in space.
A lot of kids felt that way.
Right. But digging into the historical mechanisms Lucas was utilizing, the political setup is actually a terrifying masterclass in democratic erosion.
Well, the genius of the political plot is how mundane it appears on the surface. The Galactic Republic has stagnated, bureaucratic gridlock has paralyzed the government.
Sounds familiar.
And into that void of inaction, massive corporate entities like the Trade Federation, the Commerce Guild, and the banking clan haven't just bought influence. They have secured actual voting representation in the Senate.
Take a second to process how insane that concept is. Like, imagine a multinational tech conglomerate or a global shipping corporation, not just hiring lobbyists, but having their own standing military, an armada of warships, and a literal seat at the United Nations.
It's wild. But that corporate empowerment is the vulnerability Palpatine, secretly the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, entirely exploits.
He plays everyone.
He does. He orchestrates the blockade of his own home planet, Naboo, using the Trade Federation. He purposefully creates a localized crisis that the paralyzed Senate cannot solve.
And he does this specifically to manipulate the young Queen Amidala into calling for a vote of no confidence against the current Chancellor, Valorum. He leverages the starvation and suffering of his own constituents to propel himself into the Supreme Chancellor's office. I mean, it is the textbook definition of manufacturing a crisis to consolidate executive power.
And the sources point out that Lucas wasn't inventing this strategy. He was lifting it directly from history.
We have to be clear here, too. The sources note that whether you look at ancient Rome's transition from a republic to an empire under Augustus or the collapse of the Weimar Republic, the patterns are there. Commentators have drawn parallels to everything from the Nixon era to the post-9/11 Bush administration.
Right.
And regardless of your modern political leanings, and we are staying entirely impartial here, the historical blueprint Lucas was pulling from remains identical. A democracy is dismantled from the inside out when citizens become so frustrated by gridlock that they willingly hand power to a strongman who promises to fix things quickly.
The insidious threat in Star Wars isn't an alien invasion. The system is rigged so that the destruction is entirely legal. The Senate votes for its own irrelevance.
It's chilling. But, Lucas balances this incredibly dense cynical political philosophy with world building that is just bursting with joyful detail.
Practical sets and the background characters.
Yeah, let's look at the sheer density of the Galactic Senate scenes. To make an incomprehensibly large galactic government feel grounded and lived in, the production team hid brilliant Easter eggs in the margins.
I know exactly which one you're going to mention.
If you pause the frame during the Coruscant Senate hearings, you can clearly spot 3 aliens in a Senate pod that belong to the exact same species as Steven Spielberg's E.T.
It's such a wonderful nod to their long-standing friendship.
But the implications of that visual joke are genuinely fun to unravel. In Spielberg's film, E.T. visits Earth. So if E.T.'s species has a voting bloc in the Galactic Senate of Star Wars, that technically means Earth exists within the broader Star Wars universe.
I love that thought experiment. And the cinematic homage extends beyond Spielberg, too.
Oh, yeah.
When Qui-Gon is negotiating in Watto's junk shop on Tatooine, sitting quietly in the background is an actual EVA pod from Stanley Kubrick's 1968 masterpiece, 2001. A Space Odyssey.
And the sources emphasize this wasn't a replica built by the art department, right?
Right. 2 of the original pods from Kubrick's set were lost decades ago, and one of those actual physical props somehow ended up sitting in Watto's junkyard.
That is wild to me, and the casting is just as layered with hidden details, like Natalie Portman's primary decoy, the handmaiden Sabe, is played by a pre-fame Keira Knightley.
The makeup and costuming were so precise that Knightley's own mother visited the set and reportedly couldn't tell her daughter apart from Portman.
Imagine your own mom not recognizing you. We also get the first of 3 prequel cameos from George Lucas's daughter, Katie Lonis, playing Anakin's childhood friend, Amy.
All of this texture makes the galaxy feel real.
Yeah.
But if we are going to talk about making the unreal feel real, we have to tackle the most misunderstood and controversial element of the Phantom Menace.
Jar Jar Binks.
Jar Jar.
Yeah.
And the actor who brought him to life, Ahmed Best.
Yeah, the legacy of Ahmed Best is a story of staggering technological triumph, followed by just devastating personal trauma.
It really is. At the time of release, critics and adult fans just eviscerated the character as annoying slapstick.
Oh, they were ruthless.
But historically and technologically, Ahmed Best was arguably the most important actor of the decade. He was pioneering a digital revolution that the industry just wasn't ready to understand.
Because when Ahmed Best put on that motion capture suit, the rulebook for CGI was essentially blank.
Completely blank.
Before 1999, CGI characters were mostly isolated in the frame, or they didn't require complex, emotional, interactive dialogue with live-action actors.
Best was out there in the desert heat, walking, talking, and physically interacting in real time with Liam Neeson.
He forged the exact template for the live-action CGI hybrid performance that is standard in every Marvel movie today.
And his physical comedy was meticulously engineered. George Lucas specifically directed Best to channel the silent film star Buster Keaton.
Which is so evident when you rewatch it.
Yeah, the final battle sequence on Naboo, where Jar Jar fumbles his way through destroying battle droids, is structured beat for beat like a Keaton film.
When Jar Jar gets a destroyed droid chassis stuck to his foot and starts accidentally firing blasters, or when he flicks onto a tank and takes a cannon blast to the groin, Best physically performed all of those chaotic, acrobatic maneuvers in the tracking suit.
He really did.
I think people fundamentally misunderstand how motion capture works. I like to think of it like building a house.
Okay, let's hear the analogy.
The animators at Industrial Light and Magic are the ones constructing the beautiful photorealistic exterior, right? They're painting the walls, laying the shingles. But the actor in the mocap suit, they are the structural foundation and the wooden framing.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Without Ahmed Best providing the weight, the gravity, and the timing, the CGI character has no soul. And the animators knew this.
Oh, absolutely. Best developed an incredibly symbiotic relationship with ILM animation director Rob Coleman. There's a story in the sources where Best is walking through ILM and meets an artist who looks at him and says, "I've been working on your arm for 3 months, just your arm."
3 months on an arm.
That level of microscopic dedication from both the actor and the animators is what made the illusion work. But the cultural backlash was brutal.
It really was. Best has spoken with heartbreaking honesty about the toll it took on him. He felt like he had let everyone down.
He looked at the mountain of groundbreaking work they had accomplished and felt that he had, in his own words, tanked it.
He entered the project believing it would be a springboard to serious acting roles, and instead he became the primary target for early internet vitriol. I really have to challenge the way audiences consume media here.
Go for it.
Does our modern seamless reliance on CGI make us completely blind to the sheer physical and emotional toll required of the performer? In 1999, audiences thought, the computer drew Jar Jar, so why is this guy taking credit?
They divorced the voice from the physical performance.
Exactly. It's a fundamental lack of media literacy that resulted in a real human being suffering immensely.
It is a profound failure of empathy from the audience. And the irony is palpable today. We celebrate actors like Andy Serkis for their motion capture brilliance, while the animators often go uncredited in the public eye.
Right.
But with The Phantom Menace, the animation got the awe and the actor absorbed all the hatred. Yet George Lucas actually predicted how this would play out.
He did. Lucas told Best, 20 years from now, nobody's going to remember this controversy. The kids who love Jar Jar are going to grow up and they're going to change the narrative.
And Lucas was entirely correct.
He really was. The generation that grew up with Jar Jar are now the adults driving the cultural conversation, and they have finally given Ahmed Best his flowers.
It is one of the most gratifying redemptions in Hollywood history. But before we move into the next era of the saga, we have to talk about the emotional engine of the film.
The music.
John Williams' score. And specifically, Duel of the Fates.
That track is pure adrenaline. The moment the hangar doors open, Darth Maul ignites the dual blades, and that choir hits.
Chills.
It is a permanent cultural touchstone. But if you dig into the mechanics of what the choir is actually singing, it reveals the depth of John Williams's genius. It isn't just epic-sounding gibberish.
Far from it. Williams pulled fragments from an archaic, medieval Welsh poem called Cad Gadw, which translates to the Battle of the Trees.
Okay, stop right there. A medieval Welsh poem.
Yes. He took these ancient Welsh lyrics, loosely translated them into Sanskrit, and then rearranged the syllables to fit the musical meter.
Why go through the labyrinthine process of translating Welsh into Sanskrit just to scramble the syllables? Why not just have the choir sing in English?
Because Williams understood the psychology of language. If the choir sang in English, the literal meaning of the words would engage the logical, analytical part of the audience's brain.
Ooh, they'd be distracted.
Exactly. They would be trying to decipher the lyrics instead of feeling the music. Sanskrit hits the Western ear with a raw, phonetic power. Williams wanted to imbue the lightsaber duel with a religious, temple-like atmosphere.
That makes so much sense.
It visually looks like an action scene, but musically, Williams is telling you this is a spiritual war. The fates being dueled over are not just who wins the sword fight. The prize is the fate of Anakin Skywalker's soul.
Wow. That perfectly bridges the gap between the political and the mystical. And, that spiritual battle for Anakin's soul ends in a deceptive, fragile peace.
Very fragile.
But off camera, both in the Star Wars galaxy and at ILM Studios, a decade of intense, quiet escalation was happening, which brings us to the boiling point.
Exactly 10 years have passed when we enter Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. The galaxy is teetering on the precipice of civil war.
A separatist movement.
Yeah, orchestrated by the charismatic former Jedi Count Dooku, and it's threatening to tear the Republic apart. We open with brutal assassination attempts on Padme Amidala, who is now a prominent senator fighting against the creation of a Republic army.
The narrative smartly splits into two distinct genres here, which is really cool. Obi-Wan Kenobi takes on a hard-boiled, noir-style detective mission to find the assassin.
It's very Dashiell Hammett in space.
Totally. He tracks a bounty hunter, Jango Fett, to the storm-battered ocean planet of Kamino, where he uncovers a massive secret cloning facility building a biologically engineered army for the Republic.
And meanwhile,
Anakin, now a highly capable but dangerously arrogant Padawan, is assigned to protect Padme. They hide out on Naboo, falling into a forbidden romance.
But the romance is shattered by Anakin's prophetic nightmares of his mother's suffering. Disobeying Jedi orders, he returns to Tatooine, only to find Shmi Skywalker has been abducted and tortured by Tusken Raiders.
He arrives just in time for her to die in his arms.
And then the dam breaks. Anakin slaughters the entire Tusken camp.
Not just the men, but the women and the children.
Exactly. It is his first horrific descent into the dark side, driven entirely by grief and a toxic need for control.
And this localized personal tragedy rapidly merges with the galactic one. Obi-Wan tracks Jango Fett to Geonosis, uncovers the Separatist droid factories, and is captured.
So Anakin and Padme attempt to rescue.
Right, but they're captured themselves, and this ignites the sprawling Battle of Geonosis, officially launching the Clone Wars.
Now, central to all of this sprawling romance and war was the immense pressure of casting an older Anakin Skywalker. George Lucas conducted an exhaustive global search before landing on a relatively unknown actor, Hayden Christensen.
I remember the hype around that casting.
Oh, it was massive. Lucas was looking for a very specific psychological dichotomy. He needed an actor who possessed a naive, boyish charm, but who also carried what he described as a James Dean sullen edge.
That describes Hayden perfectly. Christensen had this incredible ability to project terrifying dark intensity just through his micro expressions, while still looking like an earnest kid who is, drowning in expectations.
And his physical dedication was immense. He knew he had to visually sell Anakin's transition from apprentice into a hardened warrior.
What did he do to prep?
The sources note he spent 3 months training in Sydney, eating 6 high-protein meals a day and bulking his frame up from 160 pounds to 185 pounds. He literally built the physical armor of a Jedi general onto his body.
Yet, despite that physical transformation, Christensen bore the absolute brunt of the criticism directed at the film's romantic dialogue.
The dialogue is definitely a talking point.
I mean, lines like, "I am haunted by the kiss that you should never have given me," or his infamous angst-ridden monologue about how much he hates Sam, but they are frequently mocked as unrealistic and clunky.
They are.
I have to challenge Lucas's execution here, even if I understand his intention. Lucas has a very staunch defense for this dialogue. He argues that he explicitly modeled the tone of Star Wars after old-school westerns and Saturday matinee soap operas from the 1930s.
Right, the Flash Gordon influence.
Exactly. In those genres, dialogue wasn't meant to sound naturalistic or casual. It was highly stylized, deeply earnest, and dramatically heightened. Anakin isn't supposed to sound like a guy at a coffee shop. He's supposed to sound like a tragic, courtly knight from a melodramatic space opera.
And that is the auteur theory defense. The style of filmmaking Lucas was honoring went out of fashion decades ago, which is exactly why it jars a modern audience. It is fundamentally true to the cinematic DNA of what Lucas believes Star Wars is.
But I'd argue that if you write a movie in 2002 and use the dramatic vernacular of 1938, you are inherently going to alienate your audience. Is an intentional stylistic choice still a success if the viewer is taken out of the experience?
It's a fascinating tension between an artist's vision and audience reception. However, where that intentionality undeniably succeeds is in the visual design.
Oh, the design is flawless.
Doug Chiang, the lead design director, established 4 core principles that dictated every visual element we see on screen.
Let's hear them.
Well, 2 of those principles are vital for understanding how Star Wars tricks the brain. The familiar and not familiar rule, and the 3-second rule.
Okay, what's the 3-second rule?
It dictates that the audience must be able to completely understand what a vehicle is and what its function is within exactly 3 seconds of it appearing on screen. The silhouette alone has to communicate its purpose.
Which ties directly into familiar and not familiar. Lucas and Chiang love to take objects we recognize from our own reality, strip them of context, and drop them into a fantasy realm.
Give us an example.
For instance, the battle droid Siki speeders, those things we see hovering around, they're essentially modeled on the chassis, handlebars, and standing posture of a jet ski.
Oh, totally. Or Queen Amidala's sleek silver royal starship, which is directly inspired by the aerodynamic, sweeping lines of the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane.
It's brilliant.
Even the alien creatures adhere to this grounding. Look at the Gungans riding the Kodu, those 2-legged dinosaur ostrich hybrids.
Right on Naboo.
The shape of their saddles, the way they hold the reins, and their riding posture were explicitly modeled on cowboys in Western films. It provides a subconscious anchor for the viewer's brain.
And speaking of how the brain processes images, we really have to debunk one of the most pervasive, frustrating misconceptions about Attack of the Clones.
The green screen myth.
Yes. There is a massive contingent of people who believe these films were just actors standing in empty green screen boxes, relying 100% on CGI. That narrative completely erases the staggering amount of practical physical artistry that went into this production.
The reliance on highly detailed practical miniatures in Attack of the Clones is staggering. Take Camino, the storm-drenched cloning facility.
Yeah.
Those pristine, saucer-like exterior buildings rising out of the churning ocean. Those were highly intricate physical miniature models.
No way.
The sweeping, glowing interior hallways. Many were models. The vast Geonosis execution arena, where the climactic battle takes place, was an absolutely enormous, incredibly detailed, practical set piece.
So if you are listening to this and wondering, wait, if Camino and Geonosis were physical models, why do I remember them looking like bad CGI? I think it comes down to the uncanny valley effect created by the characters inhabiting those sets.
Break that down.
Look at the clone troopers. Not a single physical suit of clone armor was manufactured for the prequel trilogy. Every single clone trooper is entirely computer generated.
Wow. Even the close-ups.
Yes. The actors playing the clones either wore motion capture suits or had their physical heads digitally mapped onto CGI bodies.
I see where you're going.
Exactly. So imagine taking a beautifully rendered, masterfully painted oil landscape. That is your practical miniature set. Now take a hyper-realistic, high-resolution digital photograph of a person, cut it out, and paste it right in the middle of the oil painting.
They don't mesh.
Both are beautiful pieces of art, but the physics of how light interacts with them don't match. Your brain immediately trips a fire alarm that says, something here is fake. Because the characters look slightly artificial, the brain falsely assumes the entire environment must be digital. The practical mastery gets swallowed by the digital composite.
That is a brilliant way to explain the cognitive dissonance of early compositing. And it highlights the immense growing pains of a production that was quite literally forcing the film industry into the future.
It really was.
Attack of the Clones represents a massive milestone. It was shot entirely on digital cinema cameras, specifically utilizing the Sony HDW F900.
To put this in perspective, if you are listening to this deep dive on a smartphone right now, you are holding a piece of hardware with a sensor exponentially more powerful than the camera George Lucas used to shoot a multi-million-dollar blockbuster.
It's crazy to think about.
The HDW F900 was the world's first digital cinema camera, shooting in 8-bit 1080p. At the time, film purists thought Lucas was crazy for abandoning traditional 35mm celluloid.
The resistance was massive. Theater chains didn't want to pay to install digital projectors. Directors felt digital looked too clinical. The data storage limits and workflow challenges were a nightmare.
But Lucas pushed through.
He did. He saw that the flexibility of immediate digital playback and the ability to seamlessly integrate visual effects without degrading film stock through optical printing was the future. He forced the industry's hand, proving that a massive, effects-heavy blockbuster could be captured and edited entirely in the digital domain.
But that digital leap terrified the artists who had to execute it. Let's look at the evolution of Yoda.
This is a great story.
For decades, Yoda was Frank Oz operating a brilliant, soulful, physical puppet. But the script for Attack of the Clones demanded that Yoda draw his lightsaber and engage in a high-speed acrobatic duel with Count Dooku.
Which a puppet simply cannot do.
Right, a puppet couldn't do that. Yoda had to become fully digital, and ILM animation director Rob Coleman was petrified.
Coleman admitted it took him 6 entire months just to build up the psychological confidence to even begin testing the Yoda sequences.
6 months of just stalling.
Yes. He was still carrying the trauma of the Jar Jar backlash, and he was paralyzed by the fear of being remembered as the animator who ruined the legacy of Yoda.
That's a heavy burden.
He had to figure out how an 800-year-old creature, who usually hobbles on a cane, would move, jump, and fight in a believable kinetic way.
And the most incredible piece of trivia here is who actually helped Coleman figure out the physics of that fight.
Oh, this is poetic.
It was Ahmed Best, the actor behind Jar Binks. Best has a very strong martial arts background. During the intense rehearsal periods, Best actually stood in for Yoda. He utilized his martial arts training to help Coleman conceptualize Yoda's agile, leaping, highly acrobatic fighting style.
It perfectly illustrates that symbiosis we talked about earlier. Best's physical intelligence and martial arts vocabulary directly informed one of the most iconic, cheer-inducing digital sequences in the franchise.
It's an amazing behind-the-scenes triumph, but, while the visual effects were evolving, the political rod of the Republic was reaching terminal velocity.
Let's examine the politics of Attack of the Clones, because the conflict we're watching unfold is entirely a mirage.
The ultimate false flag.
This is Palpatine's true masterpiece of manipulation. As Supreme Chancellor, he is the leader of the Republic. But secretly, as Darth Sidious, he controls the separatist movement through his apprentice, Count Dooku.
He is quite literally playing chess against himself, using billions of sentient lives as disposable pawns on the board.
And Dooku is such a fascinating pawn. He isn't just a cackling, mustache-twirling villain. He is a former, highly respected Jedi Master who abandoned the Order because of legitimate, philosophically sound disputes regarding the corruption of the Galactic Senate.
He has a point.
He represents genuine, idealistic opposition. But Sidious takes that legitimate grievance, corrupts it, and weaponizes it into a controlled opposition.
It is a deeply cineral historical vision of how war is utilized to serve domestic political ambitions. Palpatine uses the terrifying threat of the separatist droid army to justify the Senate granting him emergency executive powers.
And what is the very first action he takes with those new powers?
He approves the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic. He militarizes a peaceful society in direct response to a crisis he secretly engineered.
It's the ultimate political trap. It literally does not matter which side wins any specific battle in the Clone Wars, because Palpatine absorbs more authority either way. He creates the problem, waits for the public to panic, and then offers himself as the only viable solution.
And again, staying entirely objective here, commentators have pointed out that Lucas drew heavily on historical patterns of wartime executive overreach.
True.
They compare Anakin's absolutist line, "If you're not with me, then you're my enemy," to the political rhetoric of the post-9/11 era, while also recognizing that Lucas stated his original inspirations predated that, drawing heavily on the Vietnam War and the Nixon era.
The overarching historical mechanism Lucas is highlighting is that leaders have consistently manufactured or exploited foreign conflicts to bypass domestic democratic checks and balances.
It's a tale as old as time.
The emergency powers granted to Palpatine were explicitly sold to the public as temporary. But historically, once executive power expands to meet a crisis, it almost never contracts back to its original constitutional limits.
Which brings us to the boiling point, the dark, tragic crescendo of the entire saga. We move into Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
The culmination of everything.
The Clone Wars have been raging relentlessly for 3 years. The film opens in medias res with a spectacular, chaotic space battle over Coruscant. Anakin and Obi-Wan are attempting to rescue Chancellor Palpatine from the Separatist fleet.
And Anakin confronts Count Dooku once again.
But this time, egged on by a captive Palpatine, Anakin brutally executes the unarmed Dooku.
That single execution crosses a psychological threshold. Anakin returns home a celebrated war hero, but internally he is collapsing. He discovers Padme is pregnant, which triggers terrifying, hyper-realistic prophetic visions of her dying in childbirth.
Just like the visions of his mother.
Exactly. Having already lived through the trauma of a vision coming true with his mother's death, Anakin becomes entirely consumed by the desperate clawing need to save his wife at any cost.
Meanwhile, the Jedi Council makes a fatal political miscalculation. They ask Anakin to use his close relationship with Palpatine to spy on the Chancellor.
A terrible idea.
This request shatters Anakin's fragile trust in the moral superiority of the Jedi. Palpatine senses this alienation and finally springs the trap, revealing his true identity as Darth Sidious.
He seduces Anakin with the promise that only the dark side of the Force holds the unnatural power to cheat death.
When Jedi Master Mace Windu attempts a violent arrest of Palpatine, Anakin intervenes, maiming Windu to protect the only man he believes holds the key to Padme's survival.
From that moment, the tragedy accelerates at a terrifying pace. Anakin officially pledges himself to the Sith and is christened Darth Vader.
Palpatine executes Order 66, triggering inhibitor chips in the clone army that force them to turn against their Jedi generals across the galaxy. Vader marches on the Jedi Temple, indiscriminately slaughtering his former comrades.
Palpatine uses the fabricated Jedi Rebellion to declare the Jedi enemies of the state and reorganizes the Republic into the First Galactic Empire.
This all converges on the devastating, highly emotional climax. Obi-Wan Kenobi confronting Anakin on the volcanic mining planet of Mustafar.
The ultimate showdown.
They engage in a titanic, prolonged lightsaber duel that ends with Anakin dismembered, burning alive on the banks of a lava river, before being salvaged by Palpatine and sealed inside the claustrophobic cybernetic life support suit.
It's brutal.
Padme gives birth to twins, Luke and Leia, but dies, while the surviving Jedi, Yoda and Obi-Wan, go into exile.
It is a breathtakingly dark film, and the gravitational center of that darkness is the final duel on Mustafar. Let's dive deep into the choreography of that sequence.
We have to talk about Nick Gillard.
Yes, stunt coordinator Nick Gillard approached this duel not just as an action set piece, but as a visceral, violent conversation between two men who know every aspect of each other's fighting style.
Gillard's process was intense, and the necessity for strict rehearsal wasn't just about making the fight look cinematic, it was about literal physical survival for the actors.
People don't realize how dangerous it was.
The prop sabers they swung during filming weren't light plastic tubes. They were solid carbon fiber or aluminum. If you missed a block at full speed, they would easily shatter bones.
Ewan McGregor actually broke Gillard's finger during a rehearsal for Phantom Menace, and Gillard suspects he broke Ewan's finger during an Attack of the Clones.
Gosh.
McGregor apparently hits with incredible force. Gillard had to specifically reinforce the hilts of Ewan's lightsabers just to withstand the impact of his strikes.
And the complexity of the choreography in Revenge of the Sith operates on a level of martial arts specificity that is unparalleled. Take the duel with Dooku at the very beginning of the film.
Right?
Gillard incorporated a highly complex move that fans rarely notice, referred to as V3UBWT.
Okay, V3UBWT. Break down the mechanics of that.
It stands for vertical third up, back with twist. It's a phenomenally fluid, complex maneuver Dooku utilizes when he has Anakin attacking from one side and Obi-Wan attacking from the other, allowing him to seamlessly fend them both off simultaneously without losing his footing.
I love that level of obsessive detail. But what is truly staggering are the alternate concepts and deleted moments that didn't make the final cut, because they reveal just how dark the production was willing to go.
Like what?
During that Dooku fight, there was originally a moment choreographed where their sabers lock and Anakin casually, maliciously turns his blade and physically burns Count Dooku's eyebrow off.
Oh, wow. That is so dark.
Which is such a visceral, uniquely cruel detail. It beautifully foreshadows Anakin's impending fall into sadism. But the most significant alternate concept is the unused original choreography for the ending of the Mustafar duel.
Oh, I read about this. Let's talk about it.
The version we see in the film Obi-Wan securing the high ground on the lava bank, warning Anakin not to jump, and severing Anakin's limbs when his warning is ignored is iconic. But Gillard choreographed an entirely different, intensely violent alternative.
Let's set the scene and break down the mechanics of this alternate ending. Anakin and Obi-Wan are swinging on those repulsor lift cables over the roaring lava river.
Right.
In the alternate version, instead of jumping to the floating platform and then the bank, they swing directly onto the lava bank. Anakin immediately closes the distance, grabs Obi-Wan by the throat, disarms him, and Obi-Wan's lightsaber clatters to the volcanic ash.
So Anakin has the upper hand completely.
Completely. Anakin tells Obi-Wan he's sorry, but he has to kill him. He launches his lightsaber in a sweeping arc to literally decapitate his former master.
But Obi-Wan, acting purely on defensive reflex, twists his body, uses the Force to summon his dropped lightsaber from the ground, and parries the lethal blow aimed at his neck.
And here's where it gets incredibly brutal. As Obi-Wan spins to parry the strike, he completes the momentum of the motion in a single, fluid, diagonal strike that slices through Anakin's arms and legs simultaneously.
The most tragic part of this choreography.
Yeah.
As they spin past each other for a fraction of a second, they are both completely blind to the other's movement. It is an act of desperate reflex, not calculated execution.
It completely alters the emotional dynamic of the climax. In the theatrical version, Obi-Wan warns Anakin. He explicitly tells him he has the tactical advantage of the high ground.
Yeah, it's very deliberate.
When Anakin arrogantly leaps anyway, Obi-Wan's strike is a calculated, necessary defense against an aggressive attack. But in Gillard's alternate version, it's a frantic, messy, intimate struggle for sheer survival.
Speaking of brutal, Nick Gillard actually makes an on-screen cameo during the darkest sequence of the film, the Jedi Temple Purge.
He does.
He plays a Jedi Master named Sin Dralig, which is literally just his name spelled backward without the K. We see him fighting Vader via a grainy security hologram.
Oh, yeah.
The sources reveal that originally that scene was shot with incredibly violent choreography, including Anakin attacking younglings directly on camera. George Lucas realized it was so disturbing he had to shrink it down to a distorted hologram just to avoid an R rating.
That's terrifying. The emotional weight of all this violence is carried spectacularly by John Williams' score, though. Specifically, the piece written for the Mustafar duel, Battle of the Heroes.
If Duel of the Fates is a choral adrenaline rush, Battle of the Heroes is a symphony of pure tragedy. It feels like a funeral march for a brotherhood.
And if you analyze the music theory behind it, it is a masterclass in the use of leitmotifs. A leitmotif is a recurring musical phrase that trains the listener's brain to associate a specific melody with a specific character, idea, or emotion.
Battle of the Heroes is constructed by subtly bleeding several established themes together to summarize Anakin's entire psychological collapse.
Let's break the mechanics of those themes down, because this blew my mind. First, the piece subtly incorporates the foundational opening two chords of Darth Vader's iconic Imperial March.
Just the chords.
It's not the full blaring melody, just the ominous underlying chords hinting at the monster Anakin is currently metamorphosing into.
Precisely. Then, if you look at the melodic construction of the main action motif strings, it shares its exact musical DNA with Across the Stars, which is Anakin and Padme's soaring romantic love theme from Attack of the Clones.
But the tragedy goes deeper. It also channels two very specific, deeply mournful themes from the previous films. A motif musical scholars refer to as Anakin's love for Shmi, which plays when he leaves his mother in Episode 4, and Anakin's grief, the haunting melody that plays during her funeral in Episode 2.
When you blend all these distinct musical elements together, John Williams is essentially telling you the entire narrative of Anakin's fall without a single spoken word.
The music is doing the heavy lifting?
The music itself is articulating a thesis. The agonizing pain of losing his mother has driven Anakin on a desperate, dark quest to save his wife, which ultimately destroys everything he loves and transforms him into Darth Vader.
It is an absolute masterpiece of emotional engineering, and visually, bringing this dark culmination to life required calling in some legendary favors. Steven Spielberg actually served as an uncredited guest director on Revenge of the Sith.
Wait, really?
Spielberg?
Yes. Spielberg helped pre-visualize and storyboard some of the most complex kinetic sequences in the film, including the chaotic chase scene on the sinkhole planet Utapau with General Grievous. That whole sequence is incredible.
He also helped with the devastating montage of Order 66 and sections of the Mustafar duel itself.
And the physical environment of Mustafar is a triumph of combining practical model making with digital enhancement. They built an absolutely massive practical set for the volcano planet.
How big was it?
It was 33 feet long, 18 feet wide, and 7 feet high. They literally pumped a miniature lava river through it.
And to make the lava feel truly dangerous, violent, and authentic, camera crews were dispatched to Italy to film the real-life eruption of the Mount Etna volcano.
So that lava is real.
Yes, they took that terrifying high-definition footage of spewing magma and composited it into the background behind the actors and the massive miniature set.
It grounds the fantasy in terrifying geological reality, and grounding the physical reality of the characters was vital to Hayden Christensen.
Right. When it came time to film the epilogue where Anakin is sealed in the Vader armor, the production team naturally assumed they would just hire a massive 6'6" stuntman to wear the suit, just as they had done with David Prowse in the original trilogy.
But Christensen absolutely refused. He insisted on wearing the suit himself. He felt a profound ownership over the character and wanted to physically see Anakin's journey through to the bitter end.
Because Christensen isn't naturally as tall as the Vader frame, he had to wear massive lifts in his boots and a suffocating, bulky muscle suit to fill out the armor.
That sounds miserable.
The physical proportions were so challenging that his own eyeline was completely obscured. He was actually looking through the mouthpiece of Vader's helmet, not the eye lenses.
That kind of severe physical discomfort, the claustrophobia and the limited vision, probably only aided the performance of a man waking up to realize he is trapped forever in a cybernetic prison.
Oh, absolutely. But beyond the localized personal tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, we must examine the macro tragedy of the film, the fall of the Republic. This is playfully encapsulated in Padme's iconic despairing line as she watches Palpatine declare himself emperor.
So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
It remains one of the most chilling lines in modern cinema, specifically because of its historical accuracy. The Republic didn't fall to a sudden, violent military coup overriding the government from the outside.
No, it fell legally.
It fell through the meticulous manipulation of fear and the willful surrender of power by an exhausted, terrified Senate that genuinely believed they were voting for their own security.
Palpatine didn't burn down the democratic institutions. He convinced the institutions to willingly hand him the keys and lock the door behind him.
And in analyzing this collapse, we really have to critique the role of the Jedi Order in allowing this to happen.
The Jedi are not blameless here.
Not at all. The Jedi presented themselves as apolitical, enlightened peacekeepers, but they allowed themselves to become deeply enmeshed in the corrupt political structures of the Republic.
They became generals in a political war.
Yeah.
By fighting as soldiers, they compromised their moral high ground and blinded themselves to the Sith plot happening literally right under their noses.
They were so intensely focused on the battlefield tactics of the Outer Rim that they ignored the political rot spreading in the Senate chamber.
Which brings up a deeply provocative philosophical question about the Jedi's complicity in their own destruction.
Okay, here's my theory on this, and I want to know if the sources back this up. Were the Jedi actively complicit in Anakin's downfall?
Let's hear the theory.
The Jedi strictly enforce absolute emotional detachment. No attachments, no marriage, no processing of grief. When Anakin comes to Yoda, terrified of losing Padme, Yoda basically tells him to just let her go and rejoice that she's joining the Force.
It is objectively terrible psychological advice to give to a deeply traumatized young man who already watched his mother die.
Right. The Jedi philosophy is based on the idea that attachment leads to fear of loss, which leads to the dark side. But by denying him a healthy emotional outlet to process that fear, they create a pressure cooker.
Exactly. By functioning as rigid, dogmatic soldiers rather than empathetic peacekeepers, did the Jedi inadvertently push this emotionally volatile, incredibly powerful kid directly into the arms of Chancellor Palpatine.
Because Palpatine was the only politician who offered him a father figure's sympathy. Palpatine listened to his fears and validated his emotions when the Jedi told him to suppress them.
It's a tragic irony.
Yeah.
The Jedi's strict adherence to their ancient dogmas created the exact psychological conditions necessary for the Sith to exploit their chosen one. They alienated Anakin in his darkest moment of vulnerability.
And if we connect this all the way back to the beginning of our deep dive, back to Mike Klimo's ring theory.
Closing the ring.
Yes. We see how the saga beautifully structurally contrasts Anakin's choices in Revenge of the Sith with Luke's choices in Return of the Jedi.
This is where the narrative symmetry truly shines. At the climax of Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is driven by a selfish, possessive fear of loss. That fear leads him to show absolutely no mercy, like when he executes a defenseless Count Dooku at Palpatine's urging.
Anakin's inability to let go ultimately results in him being sealed inside a mechanical suit, completely alienated from his humanity.
But look at his son. At the climax of Return of the Jedi, Luke is placed in the exact same repeating cyclical pattern.
Palpatine is urging Luke to strike down his defeated father, Darth Vader.
But Luke's driving emotion isn't fear of loss. It's selfless compassion. He refuses to show no mercy. He literally throws away his weapon.
By throwing away his lightsaber, Luke rejects the dark side, rejects the violence that consumed his father, and breaks the generational cycle.
And what is the ultimate result of that radical compassion? It inspires Anakin's redemption, leading to the removal of Vader's mask, finally freeing him from the mechanical suit.
The structural poetry of that is just breathtaking. It completely validates Lucas's vision of a massive, intricately designed, interdependent mythological saga.
It proves that underneath the occasionally polarizing dialogue or the experimental early CGI, there's a master narrative at work that is unrivaled in cinematic scale.
And that wraps our deep dive into the Star Wars prequel trilogy. If you enjoyed revisiting the fall of Anakin Skywalker with us, follow Roll Credits and share it with your fellow movie fans. And let us know what film we should cover next, old or new. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more movie magic, and maybe a few more disturbances in the Force.
But before we fade to black, I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought about the character who perhaps suffered the most complex, agonizing legacy of this entire era, Jar Jar Binks.
As you step back into the real world, consider Jar Jar. The sources reveal that his canonical fate in the Star Wars universe detailed in the novel Aftermath. Empire's End is devastating.
After the fall of the Empire, Jar Jar wanders the streets of Naboo as a sad outcast street clown.
He is despised and shunned by the adults who blame him for helping give Palpatine emergency powers. But he performs physical comedy tricks for young refugee children who don't understand his past.
Think about how eerily, heartbreakingly this mirrors Ahmed Best's real-world experience following the film's release.
It's a painful, poetic collision of a character and his creator, both bearing the incredible weight of a world that simply wasn't ready to understand them.